Hello and welcome to another episode of the Blood Brothers podcast. Tonight I am joined by Sean Coleman. Hello, Sean.
Hello.
We're Robless tonight, but our guest more than makes up for a lack of Rob tonight. We're joined by Anthony Horowitz tonight. Hello, Anthony.
Hello, Chris. Hello, Sean. I'm very sad to have been robbed of Rob.
Yes, we all are, for he has a phenomenal laugh.
He does.
Well, I don't
Other than that,
so we can do without him then.
yeah, we don't need a clown in this show.
Your book, The Twist of a Knife, has come out recently. Please, can you tell our listeners a little bit about it?
Oh, well, where to start? I mean, first of all, it's number 4 in a series, although you don't have to have read the first 3 to enjoy this one. They all stand alone. Let me give you the concept of the series first. It's the book is about a detective called Daniel Hawthorne, who's a private eye, sort of investigating curious murders, who, in order to enlarge his salary, has decided to hire a writer to write about him. And the idea is they'll produce books and they'll split the profits 50-50. And where the book strays into what I think is called metafiction is that Hawthorne hires me. So I am not the author of the book, I am the sidekick. So far, there have been, as I said, this is the 4th book. The first one was The Word is Murder. That was followed by The Sentence is Death, and then A Line to Kill, set on the island of Alderney. And I always sort of follow along, a little bit like sort of Dr. Watson to his Sherlock Holmes. We don't get on terribly well, I should say, because he is quite a difficult person. He's quite sort of menacing in his own way. He has some quite complicated political views with which I don't agree. But the worst thing is he always calls me Tony, which I really, really dislike. And so, but when we reach the 4th book, I have now arrived at your question, The Twist of a Knife. I've just broken up with him. I've said I'm not going to write any more books. I'm not enjoying the writing. And he's on his own now, and it's goodbye. And the reason I do this is because I'm very busy with a new play of mine, which is just about to open in the West End, a play called Mind Game, which does indeed open at the Vaudeville Theatre, and receives some very, very bad reviews, in particular from a Sunday Times critic called Harriet Throsby, who writes really quite virulently about the play. And the next day is found dead, murdered, with a knife in her chest. The knife belongs to me. It has my fingerprints on it. One of my hairs is on her body, and I am promptly arrested and thrown into jail. And the only person who can actually get me off the hook is Hawthorne, but he's not talking to me. And that's how the book begins.
Amazing. I've recently finished A Line to Kill, which I absolutely loved. I've read the other 2 as well, and I'm waiting for my copy to arrive. I was going to ask about your relationship, because does it represent you as a real person? Is that how you are?
Pretty much, yeah. The thing I most want to say is this to anyone listening: these books are not about me. They're about Hawthorne. Hawthorne is the hero and the star of the books. I am merely the narrator and the sidekick. So I really am Watson to Holmes. So when I talk about the me in the books, it's actually sort of almost irrelevant, because I am just following, as I say, 5 steps behind him. It's quite, it's quite fun. If Hawthorne doesn't solve the case, I don't have a book, and that's always my sort of nervousness and my worry when I'm on these investigations. But I think that the me that I'm interested in writing about is the writer. I mean, I've been writing for goodness knows how long professionally now, about 40 years, and I quite enjoy writing about writing, and everything I write is true. I mean, in A Line to Kill, I had a meeting with a very major Hollywood director. That meeting really did happen. Alderney, the literary festival at Alderney, I went to Alderney, and I did go to a literary festival there. This new book, Mind Game, was produced at the Vaudeville Theatre. It did get mixed reviews. Half the critics hated it, the other half loathed it, and so it is sort of, yeah, it is entirely true, really. My wife, Jill, turns up occasionally. My children reluctantly get dragged into the story now and then. They always say, Dad, please don't put us in the next one, but they somehow end up there anyway. The books are set in Clerkenwell. This one in particular has some scenes in Clerkenwell, which is where I was living at the time that Mind Game was on the stage. So, yeah, it's me.
But You did. This. We haven't just scooped some exclusive where Scotland Yard go, damn it, if it wasn't for those pesky kids. You haven't actually killed the reviewer, right?
Well, that would be to give away the ending, of course. One wants to try and avoid who actually the killer is, because is it me? It does. The evidence in the course of the book does tend to pile up. It's quite fun that chapter after chapter they find new clues, and every single clue points once again at me. So I get into ever further trouble and fear and worry and angst as the police are hot on my trail.
And is Hawthorne, is he based on a real person that you know, or is he fictional?
Hawthorne began his life in my imagination when I was writing a show called Injustice with James Purfoy, a sort of a legal thriller. And it had in the show a six-parter, which I think I did for ITV. It had an absolutely horrible detective called Wenborn. And Wenborn was played by Charlie Creed Miles, a really brilliant actor, and he was absolutely wonderful in the part. But I made the most stupid mistake of my life. In episode 4 of Injustice, a detective got killed. And so having created this wonderful character, I then dispatched him. And for years, I regretted it. And then when I started to write the Hawthorne novels, I remembered. And he's very much based on both that character and the actor who played him, Charlie Creed Miles. So that's where he began his life. He also has some aspects of a detective that I used to know who came to the set often. I don't know if you know this, but when we make ITV or television dramas, detective dramas, we often hire a detective who will come in and give us information and give us cred and all that sort of stuff, authority. And the detective who came in was also a little bit like Hawthorne. So he's a mashup of them both, all three.
Do they know that?
Nobody knows where I'm getting
living.
I've written another series of books, Magpie Murders and Moonflower Murders, with a particularly virulent and unpleasant writer in it called Alan Conway, who takes great pleasure in putting his friends and family into books and turning them into monstrosities, travesties of themselves. And he does it purely out of spite. I do occasionally fold people into my novels, but always with a smile attached to it, and in such a way that they will not notice unless I tell them, which I never do. So I was talking today to Jill about the character of Ewan Lloyd, the director in The Twist of a Knife, and he is very much based on a friend of ours, and I think it's a very exact portrait. He won't recognize it in 1,000 years.
I love that. So I had somebody read. I think it was the first. It was the first novel I'd written, and they said not only can I hear your voice quite clearly, knowing you very well, but also I know that person. That's two of our friends spliced together in a way that makes them almost unrecognizable, but I feel the same way about them both.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, bugger. Sorry.
That is the way. I think many writers do that, of drawing people in. I often say, I went to a particularly unpleasant prep school when I was aged 8, and every single teacher who taught me has appeared in one of my books.
Right.
I've killed every single one of them.
The only teacher I haven't killed in a book was an amazing woman called Mrs. Fabricius, and I thought she was fabulous. And her name said it all. And her
name is great, Mrs. Fabricius. Although there is a man called Fabricant in Parliament too. I wouldn't say it's exactly the stuff of a fictional hero.
No, he's the antithesis of Mrs. Fabricius.
It's very Mary Poppins, isn't it?
Yeah, no, she was
Fabricius.
She was sort of quintessentially perfect. I remember when she left teaching us, we all we rewrote lyrics to songs about how sad we were going to be. Going. She was incredible. Chris, your kids might do this for you one day.
Hopefully, yeah. I'd like to make that impact. Yeah. With when you sit down to write another Hawthorne novel, can you talk? Because, like I said, I just finished A Line to Kill recently, and the characters are all so believable. And I know we've sort of touched on characters, but can you sort of how do you sit down and think about the first, or what's going to happen? Do you plan, or do you think ahead, or not?
I start with a very simple formula: A plus B equals C. This, to me, is the core and the heart of all whodunits. A is one person, B is another person, C is the reason why A wishes to murder B. And I always begin my books with the motive. To me, that is the absolutely most, it is a quintessential heart of a good whodunit, which is to say, it's got to be something interesting and original. It's not good enough if it's just, he kills her or she kills him to get his money. He kills her because he wants to have an affair with somebody else. These sort of ordinary type stories. You're looking for something which is, I don't know, just different, slightly wacky, slightly out there. And that then gives you the sort of the founding block, the sort of the cornerstone of the entire novel on which you can build everything. And as for the building process, I think of it as a little bit like the dartboard. A dartboard has a bullseye, and I've just told you the bullseye, which is these two people and the motive for the murder. But if you start thinking about who those two people are, one might be, shall we say, a teacher. We're talking about teachers, and the other might be, I don't know, a teacher and the mother of one of the school children. And the teacher is murdered by the mother of this school child. And let us not ask now what the motive is, but then now we are in a school environment. So our outer circle is going to have all the other teachers there and other parents too. The mother of this child may well have a partner, a father, or another mother. I mean, depending on which way I want to go with those two characters. So I start to explore her life. And I begin to think of what reason might she have for wanting to kill this teacher. Is it obviously because he was bullying or in some way abusive towards her son? That doesn't seem to me to be quite a good enough motive for a murder because, the thing about a murder mystery is that to commit murder is the stakes are very, very high. I mean, in golden age crime, you would be hanged if you were found guilty of murdering somebody. Nowadays, you're going to go to prison for, well, probably about 15 to 20 years. And that's a big chunk of your life to sacrifice. So I don't think you're going to kill a teacher just because he's been mean to your kid. And if he had been in some way, shall we say, disgustingly abusive to the kid, there are plenty of other channels you could go through to report him and have him removed from the school. So you start to look for an interesting motive. And that is sort of inbound in those first two circles. And when you get to the other sort of characters in this, the groundsman in the school, the guy who mows the lawn, who may have been looking through a window and may have seen something, or there might be the I don't know, the mother has got another parent who is in some way connected to this thing. Or it could be that the child has been bullying another child and it is their parent that is involved. So you see what I mean? It spreads its tentacles out and out and out until you get finally to the double 20 and the double 15 or whatever on the outer ring. And then you've got the whole dartboard and you can start making all sorts of connections between number 20 and number 7 and number 3. You draw your lines. When I start writing a whodunit, I will probably spend 3 months minimum just thinking of the plot, thinking of the story, thinking of clues, the red herrings, the suspects, the sort of the fabric, if you like, of the book before I write a word. And I have a notebook and I will write 10, 15 pages of notes to myself before I write a single word of the book.
And I think that, the character for whodunits, especially the characters and the red herrings are so intricately woven between the two of them. But the cast of characters that you can draw into, that anybody could have done it, that everybody has a possible reason, but not necessarily the best reason. And there's so many complexities that you can build. It's such a, it's almost like theatre playing with that.
Very much so, I think. But the secret is, I think, is to start with characters. So I think the great thing about whodunits is that they are a very fast way to get involved in the lives of people you don't know. Whodunit presents 10, 15, 20 people to you. And of course, you're asking which is the murderer and what is the motive, but you're also sort of asking questions about their personalities, about which one of them might have had the passion, the anger, the vitriol to commit murder. And I think that if it becomes too much a question of just what I've been describing, the sort of the lines and the clues and the sort of the sort of construction of a thing, it can become quite boring. So I do try quite hard, and I forget who it was now. I think it might have been you, Chris, or was it Short, who said that the characters in my books work. That to me is what it's all about. It's about having really interesting, fun characters, people you sort of want to meet.
Yeah, and there's. Sorry, you go. No, you go.
It's just about the sort of character design concept and whether you spend a lot of time plotting and a lot of time sort of creating before you commit word to page. Is there a point at which tertiary, secondary characters will pop up and surprise you with their own actions, or is it an unsurprisable feast?
No. The book, you've got to have enough flexibility and room for maneuver. I mean, I've often given the analogy that constructing a structure for a book is a little bit like visiting a city for the first time, and you need a map. So if I go to Paris and I don't have a map, how do I know that I can visit the Notre Dame in the morning and then go to the Louvre, which is just a few minutes walk down the river in the afternoon? But so therefore, the map, the structure, tells me how close they are to each other and what an easy walk it is. But at the same time, the map doesn't tie me down to doing that. It does the exact opposite. It allows me to say, actually, I don't fancy going to the Louvre this afternoon. Hey, look, Bertillon ice cream shop is just down the road from Notre Dame. Let's go there instead. And so the structure is liberating. It's not constrictive. And I know writers, Ian Rankin, you mentioned in our preamble, who I don't think does a structure at all. He writes the first sentence and dives into the book and goes where it takes him. And of course, his books are wonderful. So I'm not saying that this is the right way to write or the only way to write, but it's the way that works for me.
Yeah, I think it's just that we're in the hundreds of interviews now with authors over the last.
What took you so long to get to me? I mean, I'm at the bottom of the pile, obviously.
No, I tell you what's been happening is we've been working our way up the pile.
Yeah.
I see.
We've struck gold now.
Where we're putting it. Okay.
Sort of peaking. We're peaking. We're in the realms of knights and other business, and commanders of the British Order. We're all over the shop with this. But I think what's been universal with talking to writers is that we hear voices and when we're writing, we allow those characters to speak, and we test out whether we agree with what they're saying or not, and whether it works with the story. But sometimes, it sort of flows, and that flexibility exists. And whether you're plotting meticulously or free-forming completely, the character's voice, when things work properly, the character's voice is another person sitting talking to you.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I often think of myself as a stenographer. I'm not writing the dialogue. I'm sitting in the corner, scribbling it down as fast as I can while the characters are saying it. So I don't think up every word they're going to say. I listen to them and write down what they say. But that said, I'm not the sort of writer who believes that characters have a life of their own and can get out of control. My characters do what I want them to do, and they'd better not try otherwise.
Yeah, because that really does bugger everything up, doesn't it?
It would, yes.
With your sort of many writing hats on in different series, is Hawthorne now your sort of main going forward?
I think so, yes. I mean, I'm planning to do, I think, something like 12 in the series. I mean, I always conceived it as being quite a long-running series because there is an overriding arc rather, which is the nature of Hawthorne himself. What was it that turned Hawthorne into this spectacularly difficult man? What happened to him as a child in a place called Reeth in Yorkshire?
Mm-hmm.
And who are his parents and why aren't they around anymore? Why is he so mysterious about himself? And what is the truth of his relationship with his wife and son? These are all questions. The funny thing is, and I'm sure you'll empathize with this, Sean. When you write a series, you always do learn more about your characters. If you write a single book, as you write the book, you're always questioning the character on the page and trying to sort of get deeper into that character so that they have a complete life. In the Hawthorne novels, I'm doing it both on the page, but also, as it were, in real life, in inverted commas, because I am, as the narrator, fascinated by him and want to meet his wife. And in the new book, of course, A Line to Kill, there are quite a lot of clues as to what makes him tick. There's a strange organization now that we know he belongs to. There's a man called Morton who is obviously going to turn up again quite soon. There is a sort of a strange half-brother type character who turns up in one chapter towards the end. So So, the pieces are falling into place, but, page by page, but it'll take me 12 books to get to the truth.
Amazing. Well, that's fantastic news.
That is very good news. We're like, good. There are more.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously, you say like you're the sort of following character, but do you know in your head right now how it ends, or are you just going to explore that book by book?
I sort of have 70% of the answer to what happened to Hawthorne all those years ago. Not all of it, because we were talking earlier about structure and how it pins you down. I think it's important for a writer to surprise himself, herself. That if you don't surprise yourself in your writing, it's quite hard to surprise the reader in their reading. Absolutely. So I do leave myself room for sort of things happen. When I'm writing an Alex Rider book, I'll often throw him into terrible danger without any idea of how he's going to escape. And when he does escape, it comes as a pleasant surprise and indeed a relief, because that's a series that's continuing to run. And I would be very sad if he was, vanquished by one of the bad guys.
But that really comes across and works incredibly well. I was going to say, the kids and I are huge fans of the Alex Rider series because of that. Because kids will throw themselves into that kind of stuff with that same abandon, without the sense of mortality, without the sense of their own fate, and then go, right, okay, he survived. Bloody great, let's go again. And it sort of gives that joy to the danger. That's it's a very difficult balance, I think, and I just think you do it exceptionally. So,
well, thank you for saying that. I mean, I've always found it interesting that children, in the course of my lifetime, have become ever more prescribed. That is to say, we're so afraid of them now, and there are so many measures to keep them safe. Obviously, health and safety measures is what I'm talking about here. So many sort of things that I took for granted as a child, which, nowadays no child would be allowed to do. But I've often thought that actually the modern child, to a large extent, only has adventures in their reading and in their books. Because, it's not 100% the case, but to a large extent, for many children, adventure is now considered too dangerous.
I know, I completely agree. I mean, I was brought up in 1970s South Africa, and it was wild. There was a lot of things that you would now go, I'm not sure that was your best parenting decision, but here we all stand. That doesn't mean it's the thing we should all do, but I think there's a middle ground between the sort of sanitized, it's not restricted, because that's an unfair thing, but the way society has changed and the way technology has changed childhood, and the way our fears of the outside world have changed childhood, all impact that ridiculously dangerous freedom that I had as a child of the 70s.
Well, also remember the huge change in our life was brought about when one of the governments, I forget which one, brought in a no law, no fee, no win, no fee lawyers, where anybody can now be sued. So, everybody is also terrified of anything happening to a child. And school trips have been much more reduced. The camping, swimming in rivers, climbing trees, all that sort of stuff has had to be sort of cut back. Listen, I don't want children to get hurt themselves. I don't want children to be in danger. But I do think that it is troublesome if a child grows up to be an adult without any sense of what danger actually is.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree. I mean, I remember a school trip we went on where the bus broke down, and the teacher stood on the side of the road and flagged down passing travelers to take 4 children at a time as hitchhikers to the nearest town, which to me now seems the most foolhardy and ridiculous thing that's ever happened. But you can see why in the 80s they thought this was okay.
When I was in my teens, 18, I hitchhiked from Singapore to London. And I don't think anybody would do that anymore.
No, that's one hell of a truck driver who agreed to that journey.
It only took 3 months.
Goodness.
That's not bad going.
No. Were people receptive to you? Did you get it fairly easy?
Well, that was an adventure and a half, because, of course, it involved things like going over the Khyber Pass into Afghanistan. I was in Kabul for a long time. I went through Iraq and Iran and Pakistan and India. And a lot of these places now are so off limits and so sort of, nobody in their right mind would let alone hitchhike, and no one in their right mind would even fly over the places. So it's sort of it is just a changed world, and it's but it's on the other hand, it's one of the great things about writing the Alex Rider books, which is that it provides a sort of a quintessential adventure, which has always been there, and I think that children still respond to it for that. I mean, the daring do and the escapes and the chases and the gunfights and all the rest of it.
No, but I think you're right that they live it through literature characters now more than I mean, we did as well. We had our own characters, and we we're just a bit more oblivious to the danger, I think. Whereas,
that's right. Well, my children had plenty of adventures, as you can imagine. They were lucky to survive in their teens. Actually, now I look back on it, but they are.
Yeah, no, it is a miracle sometimes when you're like, okay, well done. I've got 1 to 25. We're okay.
Can I ask about your Sherlock Holmes books?
Yeah.
I cannot remember when I read them years ago, and they've really stuck with me, especially The House of Silk, which was quite a dark book, really. First of all, how did you get involved with that?
That began when the Conan Doyle estate, which is an odd estate. Estates are normally very heavily involved in the work that they are protecting. So the Agatha Christie estate, for example, the Hergé estate, or the Ian Fleming estate in particular, they make a business out of protecting the copyright and promoting it. But the Doyle estate is just sort of quite quiet. It's just sort of survivors of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And they approached me. They approached me originally to write a short story in a collection they were planning. And I said, well, I'd much rather write a novel. And they said, well, that's a good idea. Off you go. So the result of that was The House of Silk, which I think still is one of the best. I think it was the first adult novel I wrote that was actually got it. That was on the money. And then I did a sequel to it called Moriarty, which I loved writing Moriarty because having done The House of Silk, I felt that I had sort of, I'm going to sound arrogant if I'm not careful, but I thought that I had done everything I could to make a perfect Sherlock Holmes book. And therefore, the second one had to be something completely different. And I decided, having done one side of the coin, I would go to the other. It's always interesting to write about bad people. Moriarty is a fascinating character in literature because he only turns up in one story in the whole book, of course, The Final Problem. And he's mentioned, I think, in 2 other stories, one of which, of course, is the empty house, the empty room. I can never remember what it's called, but the sort of when Sherlock Holmes comes back to life. Spoiler alert, sorry. I decided, and all we really know about Moriarty is his name. I mean, there's no background to him, and in fact, Conan Doyle even occasionally forgets whether he's John Moriarty or James Moriarty. The name sort of changes occasionally. So we know very little about him, but he has this extraordinary resonance in literature as being one of the great villains, largely, I think, down to his name. It's a wonderful name. The name, incidentally, of a boy who was at school with Conan Doyle. So that's where that came from, an Irish family. So I decided that I would write about Moriarty. Because he was the most evil man in the world, I would write an evil book. And that's what it is. The book has what I might call a killer punchline. The idea is that when you get to the end, you should throw the book across the room and wish you'd never read
it. Well, I love that as a concept, as an author, just going, I'm going to make you want to hate this book. I hate that you read. I hate the book, but I hate that you've read it and gone, oh, bastard, why did you do that?
But it is a mystery once again, like A Twist of a Knife, and like all the murder mysteries I write, all the clues as to what is really going on in that book are in plain sight. I mean, if you read it, and I suspect you haven't, but try and pick up a copy because it's a fun read. I'm very pleased with that book, and it's it's been in print now for about, gosh, it must be about 15, 20 years. So
yeah, no, I haven't had that pleasure, but this is the problem with this podcast, is that you end up with a very long, fantastic,
you are having.
Where everybody's read this also. You're like, yes, I will.
No, I'm sorry. It's mean of me to even suggest it, but
no, it's fantastic. I think we should always try. It was Ian Rankin last week was like, you've got to read The Driver's Seat by Muriel Spark, and okay,
yeah.
At least he was not so vain as to just say you've got to read more of my work. This week, he's read more of me. Muriel Spark, forget her. Just get me out.
Don't get me wrong, he self-promoted quite well.
Well, Ian is a pro. I'm actually being interviewed by him at Bloody Scotland in a week or two's time, which
cool.
I know him very well. He's been he's been sort of close to my wife and to myself for many years, and we bump into each other at festivals, and I'm a great admirer, of course, of his work. So it's always
we will be there. My partner and I will be there with our 3 red dogs. So if
sadly not allowed to bring my 1 black dog, but
we are welcome to pet any of the 3 red dogs out there.
Excellent. I will pet all 3 of them.
You will. You must. The smallest one is only 13 weeks old, so he is.
Are they related to each other?
Yes, they are ridiculously. The 2 are brothers by the same mother, the same bitch, but a different sire. And then the little one is their great nephew. Breeding happens quickly in the dog world.
I have a COVID dog, which I got. My wife was concerned about my stress levels during COVID, so I got a little black Labrador puppy. And within 2 weeks, my stress levels had gone over the horizon. They were in outer space because this dog was so evil and so difficult to live with. Unfortunately, he managed to turn a corner before I could either leave him on the edge of the M4 or give him to a charity. And we're now very, very good friends.
The dog is grateful to those ridiculous quarantine laws where you were only. How do you explain to the police that it is an essential journey, leaving your dog on the side? I don't know, but I think I could do it. I was testing my eyesight.
Here he is.
Look
at him.
Look up. No, he's asleep.
No, forget it.
There he is sitting.
I'm not your dancing monkey.
I got him to be a dancing monkey, so if he's going to get food tonight, he should learn to dance when he's told to.
Well, no, so we will hopefully see you in bloody Scotland.
Please come and say hello. I mean, well, I will recognise you, and I will come and say hello to you when I see you there.
Yes, I'll be the one wrangling 3
I'll see those 3 red dogs,
lordly dogs. Yeah,
and now I feel left out. I can't go.
Oh, Poppet. I'll give you a tip if you want.
Well, yeah, I don't think my head teacher would let me off.
I'm doing Frinton a couple of weeks later, if that's any easier.
Where's Frinton?
Oh, for heaven's sake. Frinton is on the Essex coast.
That's where Manchester way.
A wonderfully attractive little town. A very, very good setting for a murder mystery. It's got extraordinary Art Deco houses there.
So I was going to say, Frinton's properly golden age, isn't it?
That's right. You could really imagine a murder mystery because I can see David Suchet walking down the beach already. I mean, he probably has in the past.
Yeah, just a single twirl.
Can I ask one last question?
I say yes, of course.
About Sherlock Holmes, just before we move on from there. Did they let you sort of do whatever you fancied with it?
That was my first novel in what is called a continuity novel, a phrase I particularly dislike because it makes it sound so sort of slavish and so sort of so manufactured. It's difficult to describe quite what those books are because, of course, I'm enthralled to the writer, but at the same time, I'm trying to write an original book. The answer to your question is yes. I insisted. I said I will not even show you the book until it's finished. I want to just write the book I want to write. And they were very, very obliging and had complete faith in me. And then, of course, a few years later, I found myself working for the Fleming estate, who were much scarier. And said, I wasn't going to tell them what I wanted to do. I just said, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, whatever you want. But they were very supportive too in the end. They were very, very nice to work with. And they are, as I've said, they are a professional estate. They are really seriously working with Ian Fleming's material. And they were... they were more questioning of what I was doing. When I said I wanted to bring Pussy Galore back in Trigger Mortis, the first of the 3 books I wrote, they were quite concerned about that. And although they said yes reluctantly. And I wonder what would have happened if they'd said no, because I was quite determined that she should come back. I really wanted to do that. But I had a very good time working with them. We never fell out. And the last one came out this year, With a Mind to Kill. You're pointing to yourself behind you.
I've got it on my shelf.
At least someone. Yes, that's great. I mean, no, I was going to be rude to Sean about him not reading. I backed away from that quickly. I'm backing away from that. No, I had a wonderful time. I was very, very lucky to get to write 3 Bond novels. Bond was a huge influence on me when I was young. At the school I mentioned earlier, everything was horrible, but once a year there was the Bond film to look forward to. Sean Connery in the first ones, and then Roger Moore, and that led me to read the books, which were the perfect escape. Books still for me, from the days I was at this unpleasant school, books have always been the extraordinary lifeline, the escape, the solace, and I can't imagine my life without them.
Yeah.
I'm moving into a new house at the moment, which is why I'm sitting in the bedroom at the moment, because there are no other rooms. But today I must have carried between 400 or 500 books out of cardboard boxes onto shelves. And I asked myself, why do I do this? I'm living in the digital age now. We don't need books anymore. We don't need paper. Why am I carrying these wretched books yet again onto shelves all over the house? But I can't let them go. I mean, they're so part of my life, and every single time I look at one of them, I can tell you where I was when I read that book, how old I was, what it did for me. And to not have them around me would be sort of catastrophic, I think. But there you go. At the same time, I'm now lying on the bed, exhausted, with a bad back and in bad need of a bath.
Sciatica and nerve and knee problems.
Well, the one thing I never do is carry my own books if I can help it. When I'm at a bookshop and I see the poor bookshop owner struggling with a pile of my books, I'm afraid I don't offer to help. I do my own work.
There's definitely something about holding on to those. It's not just the book. It's not just saying I've read this. You can see it on my shelf. My dad was we moved around a lot when I was a kid, and my dad was very much like, if you haven't touched it, used it, worn it in 6 months, it's not coming with us. So this is how my mum lost her Johannesburg airport signed copy of the Beatles' White Album when they because my dad was like, you haven't listened to it in 6 months, okay. And she stupidly let him.
I assume that was she divorced him shortly afterwards.
And not well. It took us another 10 years to convince her, but eventually that was the least of his issues. But so I still have books now that I like. My collection of Spike Milligan's poems that I hold, because that was the first thing I read myself at like 6, Spike Milligan's Milliganimals, and I was like, this is fucking hilarious. There's a baby sardine and a submarine, and it's just, I mean, come on. And I would secret these little books away and take them with me and go, right, that's my one. And and so I still have like a very small shelf of books from my childhood that survived every cull that we went through. Mum culled him.
That's lovely. I mean, I've still got my original Tintin books. I've got the little paperbacks I bought of all the Bond novels when I was in my very early teens, and unfortunately, the young me did not treat them kindly. They're all falling apart a bit, as I'm now. I am. So
it all comes full circle.
Yes, it all comes round in the end.
Yes, us and the books both have spines that are now weakened. But other than that,
exactly.
Should we ask some audience questions?
Yes, dude. We had good Twitter questions.
We did have 2 very good Twitter questions.
Is this actually live? Is this actually live, not being recorded?
Oh, good God, no.
No.
It's recorded. We can cut anything out.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. But how come you have audience questions?
Oh, sorry. I meant we ask on Twitter before someone comes on. Does anyone have questions? So I've got
all sorts of thoughts went through my head there. Have I said anything terrible? Have I sworn? Have I made a fool of myself? No, look, fine.
I'm naked from the waist down.
Let's hear the questions. Let's have your audience questions.
Okay, so Andrew has asked, he says genre and format. Anthony has written spy thrillers for teens and adults, supernatural, comedy, horror, and across a wide range of formats. How do you decide where each story fits best and balance the genres within each story?
It's not quite like that. When an idea comes into my head, it comes with the genre. I know automatically whether an idea is a short story, a novel, a film, a TV show, a play on the stage, a play on the radio. I mean, it just presents itself immediately as what it is going to be. So it isn't a case of having a story and then, as it were, soaring it into shape to put it into a particular pigeonhole. When an idea comes, I also know how I think of I've often think of writing books as doing that thing you used to do with dominoes, where you may know this, where they do it on television sometimes. They have 10,000 dominoes, and somebody knocks over one domino, which knocks over another, which over another and another, and then the camera goes up in the air, and you get this extraordinary picture that forms of I don't know, it might be a flower, sort of whatever, or a bomb or something like that. I think that's how books are formed, in the same way. One idea knocks into another idea, which knocks into another idea, and what comes is a story. But you already know, or at least I already know, the moment I have an idea, whether it's a 1 domino idea or a 5 domino idea or a 500 domino idea, I can just tell from the sort of the idea itself. And that then immediately suggests to me what the genre of it's going to be.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Lovely. And Dan Stubbings asked, back to Sherlock Holmes, how difficult was it to find the correct voice for the Sherlock Holmes novels, and will there be any more?
Well, Dan, thank you for the question. I don't use the word difficult often, because I think if something is difficult, it's sort of gone wrong. I mean, I think writing is a pleasure. Writing is something that, I love doing. And if it's a struggle, if I'm having difficulty, then it probably means that I've either chosen the wrong subject or the book is in some way not working. For Sherlock Holmes, I was presented with this extraordinary genius, the genius of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. That the world he had created is so vivid and so powerful. The characters, the names of the characters, the way the stories work. It's a gift to a writer. Instead of starting with a blank sheet of paper and sort of having to think it all up for myself, I'm suddenly given the greatest friendship in literature, Holmes and Watson, and I'm given this extraordinary clarity. How many writers are there whose world can be summed up instantly, memorably, and visually in 4 or 5 words? If I say to you, growler, handsome, cobblestones, gas lamps, Stradivarius, fog, that was 6 words, but you're automatically in the world of Sherlock Holmes instantly. So it's not difficult to do it. You just have to go with it. And I loved spending, as I said, 7 months of my life was spent at 221B Baker Street in the company of these 2 wonderful characters.
But you have to know them and have passion for them too.
Well, I only did Sherlock Holmes and Bond because I loved them. I didn't take these jobs on because they would pay the gas bill. It was which of course these days they probably wouldn't have done anyway. But I took the job. I agreed to do these because I loved doing them. I mean, because I loved those, Bond and Holmes.
And will there be any more?
Well, funnily enough, there is going to be a new Holmes creation quite soon. It's finished, and this is a first exclusive. I can't really talk about it. It's not something I usually do. It's a sort of an odd it's an oddity, but it's sort of come along and will be announced very soon.
Oh man, that's exciting! Can we stop the recording right now and you tell us off camera?
I would then have to kill you, as they say. My A plus B equals C moment.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting to be involved in. I cannot wait. I'm excited now. If Rob was here, Rob loves an exclusive. He would be bouncing off the ceiling right now.
It is the first time I've talked about it, but it is something I have co-authored. I will tell you that as well. It's not entirely my own work.
Have you loved doing it?
It was not easy.
So
having said I don't like things to be difficult, there were many difficulties involved in this. But it's worked out well, I think. That's the important thing.
I can't wait.
Yeah. Oh, man. I'm so excited. Because, Maury, it came out a while ago, didn't it? The second book that
I forget. Moriarty, I think, is about 2010, 11, 12, somewhere around there. I can't remember.
Yeah. I started working at a new school around then, and it was me and the teacher that I was beside bonded over that book, and it takes me back to like starting that job where we both were like, you like crime, I like crime, and then it was in. So yeah, you've created memories with me and Emily, and sort of linked to the genre question, I guess. Rob likes to know, and we ask it when he's not here, you've explored many different genres. Is there one that you haven't yet had a go at that you'd really like to?
I'd like to do another play. I'd like to write a play that was more successful. I'd like to write possibly one literary fiction So a work of literary fiction might amuse me. I'm dabbling with poetry at the moment. I'm writing a few poems, but sort of privately, not really for publication. I think that writing is an adventure, and there's always something new to do. But my main aim in life is to make sure that the next book is better than the one before, whatever it may be.
And I mean, the Twist of a Knife has just come out last month, hasn't it? Is it going to be one a year? So the fifth in the series will be out this time next year?
I think actually going to be a little bit later than that. I have to do another book before I can write the Hawthorne. So I'm slightly up against it in terms of that. I have a plot in my head, and I have a title. It's called Close to Death. Is the title of the next one. It takes place in a close, in South London. And a neighbor is killed in a private close. So Close to Death is the title. And
beautiful.
The main clue is that the guy who is killed was a vegetarian, but has a McDonald's straw in his desk.
Oh, hello.
For McDonald's hamburgers.
You cannot do this to us. I'm so excited already. And I mean,
more than a year we have to wait for this, Chris.
I won't start it until about January, I think.
And how long will it take?
I've already started work on my notes, so I'm in the 3-month period of writing notes. It'll take me about 6 months to write it.
Right. Oh man. Well, I cannot wait. Yeah, put me down as excited. And we always finish with what are you reading at the minute?
I've just finished reading Robert Harris's new book, which is called Act of Oblivion. Act of Oblivion. My head was talking about, and I absolutely loved it. It was a wonderful book. And the next book I'm reading is by Adam Hamdy. It's called The Other Side of Night. I'm actually interviewing Adam about it in a couple of weeks' time, and so I'm rereading it at the moment. And it's a wonderful book and a very, very interesting cross-genre experiment.
Yeah, he's a great writer. I've read the other Black 13, was it, and Red Wolves.
Right. Yeah, they're his techno thrillers.
So this is a sort of slightly different thing, isn't it?
Totally different. It's a huge new departure. A very difficult book to talk about, especially in an interview, because it will be almost impossible to ask him anything without giving it all away. So we'll see.
It's beautiful to look at as well. That cover. I'm a sucker for covers.
Yeah, it is.
There you go. Yeah, lovely. Sean, what about you? What are you reading at the minute?
I'm sort of not reading for pleasure currently, but reading for research. So I'm sort of deeply invested in the history of forensics and crime scenes of 1600s London.
Very nice.
Very good. And are you going to tell us what you're reading, Chris?
Yes. So it was interesting when you talked about having books digitally because they're so much easier to cart around. I've just started Fairy Tale by Stephen King.
What's the premise of Fairy Tale?
I don't know yet. I'm only about 12 pages in, so I've started today. It starts off with a boy whose mum dies when she gets hit by a truck going across a bridge, and the dad turns to alcohol and gives it up and gets his life on the rails again, and that's where I am. I'm only about 20 pages in. Started it today.
When you're 20 pages in, that's a lot happening. Boy loses mum, dad becomes alcoholic, dad recovers from alcoholism, starts looking after kid. But that's Stephen King for you. He is a wonderful writer.
It gets a lot.
I would just say my favourite Stephen King. In fact, we should all do our favourite Stephen Kings. Mine is Firestarter.
I've not read it, so I'll put it on my list.
It's a sensational read.
Really,
really good.
Pet Cemetery, but just because I was so terrified as a kid of jumping into bed or getting into bed because of the demons under the bed.
Those three red dogs of yours coming back from the bed. They're not quite the same anymore.
That's slicing the Achilles tendon.
Really, such a wonderful premise. Such a wonderful premise for a book.
Pet Cemetery, loved it.
I really liked. It's a bit of an out there one because I've only read maybe about 6. But I read there's a short one called Elevation, which I read last year. About a man.
I've never heard of a book by Stephen King called Elevation.
Yeah, it's only like 100 pages. It's got a man who isn't physically losing weight, but he is, so you can't see him losing weight, and it's a really nice one.
Like my weight.
He did write a book called Thinner, which was about a man who is cursed by gypsies, and he begins to lose weight and becomes ever more skeletal. And it's sort of that sort of sounds similar, but
it's let me get the cover. It looks like that.
You've really got me. I've never heard of that book, and I've never seen that cover.
It's great. I found it in my local bookshop, and it was big. I quite like a little small book, and it was just in between, like all those big tomes. And I thought, I'm going to try that, and it was really excellent.
Oh well, I might give that a go. Although I rather like Stephen King for the fact that his books are so enormous.
Yeah.
How does he do it? 1,000 pages a time. I mean, once a year. Extraordinary.
Yeah, it is, and they're always such. I mean, Billy Summers was great last year. One of my favorite books that I read last year.
Yeah, I think he's managed to do that thing of going. Writing is both an art and a job, and this is how you do it. Don't spend too long doing it. Get on with it. Get it written.
If you want to know about writing, read On Writing by Stephen King.
Yeah.
Guide to how it's all done. You'd never need to do another podcast again.
Yeah, but here, never mind Stephen King.
We wouldn't get the stories.
Yeah,
that's true.
This is all about you, Anthony, and thank you so much for your time tonight. It's been a real joy,
both of you. And as I say, Sean, if you do get a moment, Moriarty and Chris, I will look up Elevation. Thank you for that recommendation.
Excellent.
I shall try and get my copy of Moriarty ready in time for Bloody Scotland, so that it can be both chewed by the dogs and signed by you.
I think I might even be able to bring you one, because I've got so many books here, and I'm sure I've seen a spare Moriarty. If I can find one, I'll bring it along.
This is what I'm talking about.
This is why we do
it. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. Even if it wasn't.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks.
It's been a joy. Bye-bye.